Moderator for this panel. He is the Associate Director of Ayala Corporation and Chief Resilience Officer and Advisor of the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, Mr. Guillermo M. Luz. Joining him are the following: the Mayor of Cagayan de Oro City, Honorable Oscar S. Moreno. Next is the Mayor of General Santos City, Honorable Ronel Rivera. Our third panelist is the Chairman and CEO of Santos Knight Frank, Mr. Rick Santos. And to complete the panel this afternoon, may we call on the Country Manager of Regis and Spaces by IWG, Mr. Lars Wittig.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you are just wrapping up lunch. This is a bit of a tough session because people are either finishing up or falling asleep. So we hope to keep this a lively session. My name is Bill Luz. I'm with Ayala Corporation, and I run a project now called the Livable Cities Challenge. And so it's my pleasure to be able to moderate this session called Investing in Next Wave Cities. What I'd like to do is maybe just to set the tone and the context for this discussion a little bit why it's so important to invest in and build up cities. I'm a great believer in local competitiveness because I think local competitiveness is critical to enhancing long-term national competitiveness. And I believe it all starts with local government units. So, why cities? Well, over 55% of the Philippine population live in cities to begin with, and cities are really the growth centers for population, consumption, resource use, even generators of waste, but they are also drivers of the economy, of the regional economy, particularly when we look at clusters of cities. And when we think about, most people, when they think about where they want to live, work, invest, or even visit, they really think of a city rather than just an entire country. They're really thinking of specific cities. So cities are important. Why do we need more livable and next wave cities and investable cities in the Philippines? It's simply because we need more economic drivers. For too long, the Philippines was...
Forum. When tweeting about the event, please use our event hashtag Arangkada Forum 2018. Do like us on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn. We also request that you complete your evaluation forms and share your feedback with us by dropping them at the registration counter. We would also like to thank our sponsors and partners, our gold sponsors, silver sponsors, bronze sponsors, patron sponsors, our supporting partner, exhibitor, connectivity partner, wine partner, and venue partner. We would also like to give a special shout out to our stable sponsors as well as our partners from the media. Lastly, we would like to invite everyone to join us at the networking cocktails at the foyer and exhibition area after the forum. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our most awaited announcement, the Arangkada Lifetime Achievement Award. Before we announce the recipient of the 2018 Arangkada Lifetime Achievement Award, we would like to honor our past awardees. 2013, former President Honorable Fidel V. Ramos. In 2014, former PEZA Director General Honorable Lilia de Lima. 2015 SGV and Company co-founder Mr. Washington Sisip. 2016 former Secretary Honorable Roberto Romulo. 2017 former BSP Governor Mr. Amando Tatanco Jr. And to introduce the recipient of the Arangkada Lifetime Achievement Award, may we call on the Director, Philippine Association of Multinational Companies Regional Headquarters Incorporated, and the Senior Vice President for Marketing of Corporate Communications and External Affairs of SPI Global, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Celeste Ilagan.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to present this year's Lifetime Achievement Award to the late Senator Edgardo J. Angara. Senator Angara, he was an educator, lawyer, banker, farmer, patron of the arts, and was the longest-serving senator in the post-EDSA Senate, serving 4 consecutive terms of 6 years each. Throughout his long and storied career as a legislator, Angara advocated for legislation that made a direct impact on the lives of millions of Filipinos. He authored landmark laws on agriculture, education, health, arts and culture, science and technology, good governance, financial reforms, and social welfare. He started his political career when he was elected in Quezon Province as one of the youngest delegates to the 1971 Constitutional Convention. A year later, he founded what would become one of the country's top law firms, the ACRA Law Offices. In his career as a legal professional, he emerged as one of the most prominent leaders of the bar, as he became president of the Philippine Bar Association in 1976 and president of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines in 1979. His leadership was recognized in the international arena. He was chosen as founding president of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Law Association, one of the largest regional association in the world. His leadership extended to the academe, when from 1981 to 1987, Angara served as the president of the University of the Philippines. Through his initiatives, the general education program was strengthened. A 7-year honors education program was strengthened. A 7-year honors medical curriculum installed. The arts and basic services was energized, and the multi-campus university organization was put in place. He is best remembered for defending the state university's tradition of dissent and obtaining fiscal autonomy. His efforts contributed to upholding its reputation for academic excellence as the country's premier educational center. He would later on continue to champion the wide-changing reforms in the country's educational system in the halls of Congress through the Constitutional Commission on Education. His reputation as a resolute reformer enabled him as senator to successfully steer the passage of groundbreaking legislation. Senator Angara was able to push for the passage of some of the country's most memorable laws. These include Free High School Act, Commission on Higher Education or CHED, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority or TESDA, the National Health Insurance Act, or PhilHealth, Senior Citizens Act, the Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization Act, the Renewable Energy Act, the Procurement Reform Act. He even played a part in putting together Republic Act number 8756, which is responsible for putting the Philippines on the map as a hub for regional operating headquarters and regional area headquarters, thereby promoting the Philippines as an important investment destination. His knowledge in the financial markets led to the passage of reform laws for the country's capital markets. These include the Credit Information System Act, Personal Equity and Retirement Act, or PERA, Real Estate Investment Trust, Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation Charter, the Pag-ibig Fund Charter, Pre-need Code, and Financial Rehabilitation and Insolvency Act. His impressive track record as an administrator and legislator and his systemic approach to reform has earned him acclaim from many important institutions. He was the Southeast Asian to win Spain's Premio Casa Asia in 2010, and also won France's Commander Don Lord de Pams. Pardon my French. This medal came from French, and he also got Japan's Cordon of the Rising Sun. He was the first Lee Kuan Yew Fellow in the Philippines, an award the Singapore government confers on individuals who demonstrate outstanding public service. The Filipino people mourn his untimely demise, but the legacy of the late former Senator Angara will live on in our hearts, minds, and our way of life. With his diplomatic but firm style of leadership, he was able to champion so many reforms that have benefited our country and our people. It is my honor and distinct privilege to confer this year's Lifetime Achievement Award to the late Senator Edgardo J. Angara.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to call on stage Honorable Sonny Angara to accept the award on behalf of his father. May we also call our previous awardees to come on stage to join the photo. And our heads of the Joint Chambers of Commerce of the Philippines. We would also like to call on the heads of our Joint Chambers of Commerce of the Philippines. gentlemen, the 2018 Arangkada Lifetime Achievement Awardee, Honorable Edgardo J. Angara. Congratulations. Thank you to our past awardees and to our heads of the Joint Chambers of Commerce of the Philippines. At this point, may we please ask Honorable Sonny Angara to speak on behalf of his father, our awardee.
Hi, good afternoon to all the organizers of the Arangkada and to the Ambassador Salinas, former Ambassador Romulo, former PEZA Director General Lilia de Lima, to the presidents of the various chambers and all the participants. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. It's truly a touching moment for our family, and on behalf of our family, we want to thank all of you for this very important award here today. I'm sure wherever my father is, he appreciates this award very much. I'm also sure he would have appreciated it more if he were still alive. But nonetheless, it's still a big honor, and to get recognized as one of the champions of business, employment, and progressive policies in the country. Yesterday, we had the joint chambers in the Senate, meeting with the Senate President, with the Senate President Pro Tempore, Senator Recto, Senator Soto, the Majority Leader, Senator Zubir, was he there? No. The chairman of the Committees on Trade, Senator Pimentel, Senator Gatchalian of the Economic Affairs Committee, and myself to hear out the various concerns of the business community. And we had a good discussion, exchange of ideas, although we ran out of time, so it was a little one-sided. We got, at least the important thing is we got to listen to you guys. I think my dad has always championed a pro-business and a gradualist, moderate type of approach to things. And surely his thinking and approach would be missed in this type of economic environment where a steadying hand is probably needed. No? But nonetheless, we appreciate very much this award, and we look forward to more interactions between the chambers and the senators and the members of Congress. So thank you again. Good afternoon to everybody.
Thank you, Honorable Sonny Angara. Congratulations once again. To introduce our first guest speaker for the last panel entitled Ports, Shipping, and the Blue Economy, on behalf of Mr. Ho-ik Lee of the Korean Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, we would like to call on the Managing Director of Yongsung Industrial Philippines Incorporated, Mr. Ki-suk Han.
Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished delegates, government and media guests, partners, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored today to introduce Panel 3, Ports, Shipping, and the Blue Economy. You should have a copy of Policy Brief Number 9 called Seaports and Shipping in your delegate kit. I encourage you to skim through it as you follow the panel discussion. Also, biographies of the panel are included in the souvenir program. Our guest speaker is DOTR Undersecretary for Maritime, Felipe Hudan, who will provide a view from the public sector on the future of seaports and shipping in the Philippines. We also invited Ms. Doris Ho Magsaysay to speak. She will join the panel late as she is opening a new maritime training school this morning in Cavite. Joining the panel now are three more experts: Mr. Christian Gonzalez, Senior Vice President and Regional Head of Asia Pacific International Container Terminal Services; Mr. Hector Mole, Assistant General Manager, Philippine Ports Authority; and Mr. Michael Royber, Chief Executive Officer of Royal Cargo. Our moderator is the well-known economist, Dr. Cielito Javito, who served as Director General of NEDA in the Ramos administration. Allow me to make a special mention regarding Royal Cargo. This is the company that provided the special crane that lifted the airplane in the incident at NAIA on August 17. When we travel by air, as we frequently do, we can forget the importance of maritime transport. 80% of global trade by volume is transported on the sea, and maritime transport is especially important for the Philippines, the world's second largest archipelago, where ships and the sea are essential for inter-island commerce and enable at least 2 million jobs. The potential of the sector to contribute to economic growth and job creation is enormous. Our policy brief, co-sponsored by 20 business groups, covers several challenges and opportunities for the Philippine maritime sector, including reversing the large trade imbalance, reducing domestic shipping costs, the important concept of regional economic clusters, port modernization, developing a blue economy with enlarged and varied onshore maritime services, enlarged shipbuilding and repair, home porting and destinations for the cruise tourism, governance of ports and shipping and safety. There is a very large menu of recommendations in the policy brief. We hope the public and private sectors can work to implement them so that in the not too distant future, the Philippines will emerge as the most advanced maritime country in Southeast Asia. I would now like to invite Undersecretary Hudan to the stage to be followed by the panel discussion.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm really honored to have attended for the first time this Arangkada Forum, and I realized how important the overviews are discussed in this particular forum. In fact, I would like to thank the officers for having organized this kind of forum, because you're not only talking of one industry, you're talking of the whole economy. And therefore, today, I was asked to present the status of port and shipping structure of the maritime sector related to developing our blue economy. So with that, perhaps you can join me in how we can do positive angles regarding the improvement of the lives of the Filipino and the Philippines as the nation. So how do we, this one? Okay, let me just give an overview of what I would like to present to everyone. One is an overview of the domestic shipping. The other one is related to our seafarers, and of course, the port structure or need for ports. We have our panelists who can also help us regarding these topics. The maritime sector, under the Department of Transportation, holds supervision over the Maritime Industry Authority, the Philippine Ports Authority, Cebu Port Authority, the Philippine Coast Guard, the Philippine Merchant Marine Academy. So in effect, you're talking of stakeholders related to movement of cargos, the stakeholders as the ship owners, and the service providers, like agents, forwarders, and so on. And of course, all of this would call on ports within our very large and very long sea lanes. So it's just an overview, and perhaps we could make further discussion as we go on with our panelists. As you will note, this is just a data about how long our coastline is. We are actually part of the archipelagic states. The Philippine domestic shipping, as you will note here, is the one that really connects not only in terms of the Philippines as a whole to the international trade, but I would like to emphasize that the domestic shipping, the development of the domestic shipping, particularly on our number of islands and long coastline, is not only to connect people, but it's also there to connect trade within islands. And that development should be part of the general plan, not only of the maritime sector, but also of our economic planners, which have been going on, but the coordination is something that we would like to have between the maritime sector and our economic planners. We will be able to understand that as we go. You will take a note that we are just presenting here on passenger ship. There are a lot and number types of vessels, as mentioned, but this one, you will note that the Roro, Pascrap, and the motor bankas, the number of which, what I would like to emphasize here is that the Roro business came into play in the early 2000s. That's why one of the factors that's really concerned by our cargo owners is, why is it that our domestic cost of freight is much higher than when we go from, let's say, Manila to Hong Kong, Manila to Taiwan, and so on? How big is that difference? When I was in the container business, I was managing a company which is government-owned in 1980s. The domestic trade cost from Manila, for example, to Cagayan or to Davao would cost you about $700 to $800 per TEU. And yet, Manila to Hong Kong would only be about $150 to $200. So when the Roro came, that made a good difference to lower down the cost. But there's a lot of factors that we do insofar as lowering down costs, which is a concern, not only of our cargo owners, but also the users of our ports, which are the stakeholders and the ship owners. Again, if you will take a look, I'm presenting this data because take a look at our passenger vessels. 31 to 35 years old, up to 36 to 40 and above. If you add all the percentages, 31 or more than 35 years old would be about almost 39 or 40%. If you include the 30 years old, it's almost 60%. Just to give you an appreciation, when I entered the government and I talked to the ship owners themselves. You know what they told me? Because I was telling them that we will go for a modernization. They said, it's not the age of the vessel that counts. It is always the function or accidents are always caused by human error. And I told them, look, I am a ship owner myself, and therefore, at times when I gave them an example, do you realize that in Japan, tankers which are 15 years old and above cannot be allowed anymore? Passenger vessels which are 20 years and above cannot be allowed by the Japanese government to go into the ocean. That's why most of the sources of our vessels comes from Japan, because the second-hand vessels are bought by the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, things like that. So what we're saying here is, I'm just presenting this for your appreciation, that this is a direction towards policy determination within the next months, or at most a year, that hopefully we should also modernize our fleet in order to ensure safety. And of course, not only because of the age of the vessels, but also our seafarers' trainings and so on. Okay. This is a presentation related to modernization. Let me just give an overview by saying it's not as simple as to follow the rules and regulations of other countries. Okay. When, for example, we make a modernization plan, let us say we will limit the age of vessels to 30 or 35 years old. It is not as simple to say we will implement this tomorrow. We should be able to implement this in maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. Why? Because the replacement process of a vessel takes about minimum of 6 months to an average of 1.5 years to 2 years. So therefore, if we make a regulation now effective 2 or 3 years from now, then our ship owners would be able to replace their vessels and modernize it within the next 3 years, for example. Why are we doing this? As I said, there's a lot of rationale, but believe you me, depending on the commercial angle of a vessel, you can recover at the very best less than 10 years investment in a vessel, or on the average, hopefully, not more than 15 years. So therefore, 2 to 3 years from now, and then you make an investment, it can be recovered. That's why we're presenting here registered shipyards. Why? For one, when you import a vessel, there's a lot of tax exemption. If you import a vessel, the shipyards that are in the Philippine Economic Zones, PESA, they are also exempted as if you're buying it from abroad. How about the shipyards that are not in the Philippine Zone Authority? This is what Marina is doing now in discussing with other government agencies in order to give tax exemptions for our other participants in the maritime sector, particularly the shipbuilders. And the shipbuilders, hopefully, because of a small shipbuilder, they make vessels not only for many types, but you cannot give them totally this type of tax exemption. But there are a lot of factors involved. Like you have a common design, you can, if you buy that, then there will be some tax exemptions, things like that. So this is just a situationer of the industry. If you will look at here, our our shipbuilders, our shipyards, are also part of the maritime sector, making some good employment and discussions for particular modernization. To make the long story short, I'll put it in another way. You remember this modernization of road vehicles? They selected 15 years only. Then you must change already. A vessel, we don't have to follow 20 years for passengers like in Japan. 30 to 35 years is good enough for as long as there's many other factors. We're talking of classification, which we are evaluating now, open pilotage in order to reduce cost, things like that. So it is something that we are looking into the next 2 to 3 years, a modernization plan of this sector. Now, you will look at the present regulations that happened so far. Phase out of wooden-hulled vessels, it was issued by the previous administrator of Marina prior to the entry of the Duterte administration, May or April of 2016. And then they said, you will just have to get a look into your IRR, which is your rules and regulations. There are times wherein you cannot say in principle that the wooden-hulled vessels should be phased out totally, because there are some routes in between our islands that there are no metal vessels, and therefore you have to study, which is being studied right now by Marina. Okay. The other one, of course, is, as you will note, Marina is very serious in studying and evaluating the routes in domestically, giving pioneer status for some new vessels, the classification societies. There are 7 classification societies in this country, which originally there was only 1. That is something that we are evaluating too. Why? Because there are things that accidents happen because of non-inspected vessels by the classification groups. And therefore, we hate that kind of authority given to class groups. Okay. In fact, I told our ship owners, even if your vessels is more than 35 years old or 40 years old, I will still allow it for as long as it will be classed by the IACS, International Association of Classification Societies. And they said, oh my, that's even more expensive than buying a new vessel. Okay. We have a study and evaluation of what kind of routes domestically. We have the eastern route, we have the central spine, and we have the actually not only proposed, but some are starting it, the Manila or the western route that connects it. The connectivity of our islands is not only because of making and good profit for our ship owners, but really to service the public, not only in terms of passengers, but development of trade among or in between islands. And that means, as I will make note later on, agriculture and economic clusters. Okay. These are the problems if we go modernization. So financing, rules and regulations, port developments, capability of local shipyards, which today we are addressing individually by all the agencies concerned. So that I'm just happy to report to everyone that in the past, maybe past few years or 2 or 3 administrations, the maritime sector agencies act independently. What do I mean by that? Marina would act independently without consulting PPA. PPA acts independently without consulting Marina or the Coast Guards now. Today, with the new administrator of Marina, General Guerrero, with the new GM of PPA, with the new Coast Guard head, they are now coordinating properly, not only in terms of board meetings, but informally, they are now meeting monthly in order to coordinate whatever is necessary for the industry. Okay, so in general, if you will take a look, way forward, these are some of the things that we are concerned about. So without going through details, if you will take a look into this involves shipbuilding, financing, and then the processes of how to help the ship owners, the RORO functions, and of course, port development. This is something that an idea that I mentioned, that in order to help the other shipbuilders, we can have a standard ship design. Just for your information, ladies and gentlemen, a ship design is more expensive than a banca. What do I mean by that? A simple ship design, a small one, would cost already from $20,000 to $30,000 US dollars. And therefore, it is not as simple to say it's so easy to design it. That's why our association of engineers, nautical engineers, is very important. The other concept, of course, is to develop insofar as an economic hub is concerned. Okay. The comment that I have here is something like this. Hopefully you appreciate that what the maritime sector is doing is not only taking a look into their own functions, Marina, PPA, and the Coast Guard on safety and things like that. We are also looking, as the Secretary instructed us, insofar as the maritime sector is concerned, on how we could help our stakeholders, of which not only cargo owners, but also the ship owners. How do we do that? There is a trade imbalance. If in general we have less exports than imports, the more also that we have imbalance between islands, let's say Manila to Cebu, or Cebu to Manila, or other islands in between. That's why one of the things that we are trying to coordinate is hopefully we would like to have an economic cluster that will analyze the trade between islands as a basis later on for our ship owners to put in and assign vessels insofar as not only passengers but also cargo development. That means not only the Department of Trade, but that means the basic structure of agriculture, being our country is agricultural by nature. Okay. So this one, as the goal itself, is very important: safe, efficient, adequate, economic sea transport. Okay. That being said, insofar as the operations of vessels are concerned, let's take a look into our seafarers. Why are our seafarers very important? As mentioned, there's a general data that was mentioned, and you will note here, maybe 80 to 90% of trade are carried by the sea. And most of our seafarers worldwide, suppliers for officers and ratings, Philippines is number 2 on officers, ratings, Philippines. It used to be number 1, Philippines on both. Okay? In the whole world, we have about 350 to 450,000 seafarers, Filipinos, on board vessels. And they represent about 30 to 31% of the whole population of seafarers worldwide. You will note that the top 10 employers of our Filipino seafarers, number 1 is Panama, and of course Bahamas and things like that. If you will note, I was able to talk to some of our ambassadors and they said, why are Filipinos preferred for vessels? For so many reasons. Number 1, the Filipino shipfarer, when they become a seaman, they do it by heart. It is something that Filipino by nature, when they are given a responsibility, would be going to a team player. Remember, a seafarer is entrusted with a very, very important function. Let me put it a very good example. When you invest in a factory that maybe cost you about $10 to $20 million, you will have to employ about 200, 300, or 400 employees. And that's where you entrust your investment. When you buy a vessel, which is the same amount, maybe from $5 million to $30 million, almost the same as a factory. How many people are on board? Is it 100 to 200 people? There are about only on the average 25, at most 30. You are entrusting your investment, and that's how important our seafarers are. And that's why, not because we are good compared to other countries, but the entrustment is very high on seafarers. Again, the Filipinos are mostly employed because also of their attitude. The attitude to really do well in order for their family to succeed. And that's why that's been the factor for our seafarers, the importance of them. Normally, our OFWs would invest, as of now, because of so many non-seafarers, there's about $20 to $25 billion return. The seafarers contribute about $6 billion. Okay. Now, because of all of this importance, the ease of doing business for our seafarers and stockholders is a direction that was or that's being done now by the Maritime Industry Authority. The certification system, for example, it used to be that the seafarers who come from the provinces or from Visayas would go to Manila and sleep here in Luneta, sleep here at the roads for about 2, 3, or even 1 month, 3 weeks to even 4 weeks. Today, because of technology, I would like to emphasize the announcement that has already been done, that a seafarer, because of technology, can now make use of computer for their certification and application for seafarer's book. And that will not make them spend more than 24 hours. And this is something that the ease of doing business is to help our seafarers insofar as that's concerned. So here, as you will note, Marina, under the present administration of General Guerrero, has started it well. Okay. Many, it's just mentioned here, do you know that in the past, even certification of seafarers becomes fake by many people, and they charge the seafarers. Now, because of computerization, everything is validated and verified. Okay. Okay, this is one of the issues that's ongoing today. And I'm sure our Chamber of Commerce, particularly from Europe, is very concerned. There's been a lot of talks about EMSA audit. If you will note, this is what the deadline is after the EMSA audit. We've done the April 30, 2018. The next is October 31, 2018. And if you will note, 2019, most on technology. Let's just give a comparison. Why this EMSA audit has become very important and significant. For the past 10 to 12 years, the group of our EMSA, which is the European Union, has been saying some comments about our educational system and so on. And yet, the response of our maritime sector was basically, okay, noted, we plan to do this, we plan to do that, we plan to do this. This time around, which I agree with the EMSA, please do not give us an answer of plans. Do not tell us again that you plan to do this, you plan to do that. You give us actual results of what has actually been done to resolve the comments and observations of EMSA, which we are doing under the administration of President Duterte. The most important thing of which is it used to be the CHED and Marina, the CHED being higher in terms of the higher education. Today, there is actually already an agreement, and we are waiting for an executive order to formalize it. But formally, they have agreed to give authority to Marina as the single maritime authority, not only in terms of regulations, but also in terms of monitoring the educational and capabilities of our seafarers. And therefore, they have started already as early as middle of this year, about May. Marina is now monitoring physically not only the process of our institutions, but also in terms of the education of our seafarers. That's why the seafarers are important insofar as our friends from Europe is concerned. Believe you me, I'd like to say something in conclusion. I am confident that what we are doing now to resolve the EMSA issues is very positive, and therefore we would be able to put in and report actions, not plans, already done. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is just an overview of the maritime sector towards our modernization plans, and particularly our concern for our seafarers, which involves a big portion for our worldwide friends in the use of our capabilities. So with that, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Judan. We would like to now call on stage our second speaker, the President and CEO of A Magsaysay Inc., Ms. Doris Magsaysay Ho.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you. Offset, I want to congratulate the foreign chambers, the AmCham, and especially John Forbes, Michael Raber, Henry Schumacher, for all the work they have devoted over the past years for the Philippines through Arangkada. I thank them specifically for always including the shipping industry voice in the seaport and shipping chapters. So the shipping industry is an invisible service to most of the public. I know this because most of friends of mine don't have any idea what I do. For those in business, shipping is sometimes viewed as an annoyance, a cost that some wish would disappear. I have mentioned to colleagues in the industry that we should protest to Amazon because they always encourage a sale by saying shipping is free. But actually, there is a very major service behind that. The reality is that shipping plays an important service, carrying over 90% of everything that you and I and everyone in the world use and consume in our daily lives, and makes it an important contribution to humanity. And we do it at a very small percentage of the cost to produce the goods that all of you here make. So I greatly appreciate this opportunity to speak before you, to move the conversation to where it counts, where shipping as a key part of a logistics chain in our archipelagic country is an agile and strategic partner, not impediment to business. However, I'd like to present two concepts which I hope can form part of the strategic discussion and policies for the position and competitiveness of the Philippines. The first is that shipping follows trade. That means that small domestic and international trade volumes result in small ships and logistics capacity. Small means higher costs. The second is the Philippines has a great opportunity to build a blue Philippine strategy where the Maritime Philippine Agenda can become a key driver of the Philippine economy. Sorry, how do you go back? Okay. As we all know, our economy is driven by domestic consumption, with negative growth of exports widening our country's trade imbalances. For every 10 fully loaded containers, Michael Reiber told me, maybe 2 come back full? Right. So imagine that 10 full containers come in and only 2 go up with exports. That means you have 8 negative. For those of us in the domestic industry, for every 10 that go south, only 4 come back full. To make matters worse, our parcel sizes of trade volumes are small. This is due to many things. One is that retail margins cannot cover the cost of keeping large inventories. Another is that infrastructure of ports are lacking. Small ports mean small ships. No port infrastructure means outdated ships requiring cranes that are no longer built in the international shipping market. We are what is called a feeder economy. Instead of shipping imports and exports on a mother ship, our customers pay a feeder cost from a hub like Singapore, Hong Kong, or Kaohsiung. Other countries we compete with, like Vietnam, are very conscious of improving competitiveness by building their scale of production. One Vietnamese trade minister I spoke with said that his country is determined to stop being a feeder economy by building economies of scale of manufactured and agri-products to attract large motherships into their ports. So we are advocating a mindset shift. That was it. To shift our focus from shipping as a problem to shipping, logistics, infrastructure, including ports, to respond to the needs of a particular trade. Remember, it takes 7 years to grow a coconut tree, 18 months for a pineapple to harvest, and many years to build a manufacturing facility. Yet, a shipping company can bring in a ship to service a trade in a few months, or if they wish, to build a special purpose ship, which could take 12 months. So instead of a challenging shift to federalism, I believe there's an important opportunity for the leadership of each region or governor of a province to identify and pursue their respective competitive advantages to drive their economy through cluster development. These clusters could be, sorry, I think I messed up my thing. Right. These clusters would be geographical concentrations of companies and institutions in a particular sector that the region already excels in, and would encompass linked sectors including SMEs, that form part of the supply chain. There would be university-led R&D, vocational training for the workforce that would be part of the successful ecosystem of shared resources and costs. The region would then be able to attract investments because of a clear story. Clusters should be developed. Clusters should be developed in proximity to port and airport infrastructure, which would be designed to make the handling of particular products efficient. The cluster would create badly needed jobs in the provinces and benefit from economies of scale, driving down the cost of shipping, power, and other utilities. We compete with Thailand. This is how Thailand presents their cluster in the internet. And we compete with Malaysia, who are developing a huge cluster right outside of Singapore with huge ports, airports, and a very clear strategy. So there are some areas for cluster development, and I'm looking at Lilia de Lima, who did so much good work with the PESA. And this is sort of something like it, but led by a provincial area, identifying areas that they already do well in. So allow me, well, I'm sorry, we have China that, believe it or not, is now shifting out of being a manufacturing zone to becoming the world's high-tech center. So you can see how strategic these countries think. So some potential areas for cluster development in this country could be the Tarlac, Subic, Batangas, etc. And I'll just go quickly through them. For example, the Clark, Tarlac, Subic Development Cluster. With the airport there, could be focus on high-tech innovation and AI. There could be selected manufacturing clusters. And there is already a shipbuilding and ship repair cluster in Subic. 3 yards that are now number 4, including the one in Cebu, in the world. But imagine that we're so proud of that cluster, but that cluster is not even big enough to attract a subcontractor from international markets. So it's a pity that we don't grab the opportunity and say, if that cluster now already has that opportunity to build shipbuilding and ship repair, we could really create something amazing for this country. Another one, of course, if you go to Zambales, is full of mango, the best mango in the world. And if you drive around there, you'll see so much empty land. It seems as if we're wasteful because we're not thinking. We're sort of having the tail wag the head, while the head really should wag the tail. One problem in that area, of course, is you have 2 heads, one for Clark and one for Subic. And I've told Vince Dizon, maybe they should just be together in planning a strategy for the region. Expansion of the port is limited to having to reclaim and encroaching into either that or into the airport. And the local government, it could have a local government strategy for the area to serve as a gateway to the north. Another one could be Batangas. In this case, the Batangas cluster is not government-owned land. It would have to be zoned with land use laws, which we don't have. There is an automotive aspect of it because all the cars coming from Thailand go into Batangas. And there's a lot of Japanese manufacturing there already. Cebu could be an amazing cluster. Right now, if you go to Cebu, the port is in the middle of all the traffic. Cebu, if I were the mayor, I wouldn't know whether my city is a tourism destination or a manufacturing. We've been pushing government to create a production cluster around a new port and bring everybody out of Cebu City, and so that you can make Cebu a beautiful tourism destination and have a much more efficient logistics hub with, let's say, manufacturing of furniture and all the things that they do well. Leyte has 300,000 hectares special economic zone. And after Yolanda, I don't know how how dynamic our vision is to have something returned there. I don't know if anyone planted coconuts or whatever, but they do have an amazing port because Philfos and Pasar have their port there. Cagayan de Oro owns Vividec, 3,000 hectares government-owned land, and with Bukidnon could be a food basket for the country. Del Monte is in the region, foreign ships already come in, and if there could be more strategic processing, logistics hub for food, not just serving Manila, but even the region. Davao cluster, Sarangani is a very long coast, similar to Chile, that could be a fisheries cluster, and General Santos has already been developed as a port. So basically, what is important to understand is if shipping follows trade, the port also follows trade. So just to give you a quick example of what I mean, this is a Ro-Ro port. A Ro-Ro port looks like a giant parking lot. That means a port carrying car trade. Today in Batangas, the cars kind of compete with the containers. This is a ferry terminal in Vancouver. It's very, even if Ro-Ro sounds cheap, if you really develop a very good Ro-Ro network, you do have to spend money on a very good terminal. This is a cruise terminal. I think all of you have probably come across those. A ferry terminal is a silo, and so on and so forth. So the second aspect of my presentation really addresses the concept of a potential maritime Philippine strategy to contribute to the economy. As what you heard earlier from Secretary Hudan, over the past 40 years, the Philippines has developed important parts of a maritime ecosystem, which could now be looked upon as just potential strategic driver for a maritime Philippine strategy. Singapore is the most successful of such an ecosystem, driven by the advantage that all ships from Asia to Europe pass the Malacca Straits. Singapore strategically and meticulously developed a maritime hub that attracts shipping investors and locators because of its stable policy regime and rule of law. Singapore has become a ship registry of choice, has a complete roster of shipping and logistics services, government support with R&D money for innovation, and the ironic part of it is many professionals working in Singapore are Filipinos. President Widodo of Indonesia has launched a maritime fulcrum as well. They have great advantage because of their strong commodity exports, but lack trained seafarers who could become the professional management pool. So Maritime Philippines, the way we envision it, would be a cluster of sectors that have grown independently and strategically, but not yet put together and meticulously strategically planned. And we hope that we can achieve this to inspire a new vision for the country. So these sectors include domestic shipping, shipbuilding and ship repair sectors, the seafaring sector, training and education, human resource and manning sectors, which in a way are actually a very high-level BPO, and technical services sector, like managing ships here, which are actually very high-level BPO business. And also building into becoming an international ship registry sector. The domestic shipping serves the transportation of products and raw materials on container ships, tankers, carrying liquid products, ro-ros, carrying passengers in trucks, barges, and LCTs carrying raw materials and goods for hard-to-reach areas. The domestic industry can be requisitioned by government in times of war and natural disasters, as was the case with Yolanda. This shipping sector stakeholders are the seed for a potential expansion into regional shipping with a vision to provide services to the region and the world. The shipbuilding and ship repair sector is now a far fourth largest in the world and can grow if strategically supported. One weakness of the Philippines as a destination for ship repair is that no ships come here because we don't have cargo. So it all comes down together. If we really develop our manufacturing and have more dynamic trade, then ships would come here and therefore it would help grow our ship repair industry. the sector has a vast manpower force. Now, you heard Undersecretary Hudan speak about seafarers, which comprise over 30% of the world's fleet and contribute over $5 billion in annual remittances. So a robust industry sector of training and education has emerged. In addition, outsourcing services such as human resources in management and training, technical management of vessels, and other outsourcing services benchmarked with Singapore is really our vision for the future. With these services, the Philippines, maritime Philippines, should be promoted with focus, but only after the private and government sectors work together towards a common vision and action plan to make the Philippines a truly dynamic trade and production area in the maritime industry, supporting it as a key driver for employment and development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doris Magsaysay Ho. At this point, we would like to call on our panelists. First up, we have the moderator for this panel, a well-known columnist of the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Dr. Shelito Habito. Joining him on stage are our speakers, Ms. Doris Magsaysay Ho and Undersecretary Judan. We have our next panelist, the Global Corporate Head of International Container Terminal Services Incorporated, Mr. Christian R. Gonzalez. Next up, we have the Assistant General Manager of the Philippine Ports Authority, Mr. Hector E. Miole. And our third panelist is the CEO of Royal Cargo Incorporated, Mr. Michael Royber.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll have to somewhat compress this panel because, again, we've already been compressing the time schedule. We have, of course, Senator Grace Poe coming right after, and she has graciously agreed to extend a little bit the timing. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started with this panel. I just wanted to start with a quick story. In the 1990s, in my previous incarnation as a government official, I made a visit to Croatia, to my counterpart in that government, and they were proudly telling me that they're an archipelagic country and they have a very well-developed maritime sector, a very strong shipbuilding industry, etc., etc. And of course, I was embarrassed to say, well, by the way, they preface it by saying, we're an archipelago of 1,000 islands. And I was embarrassed to say, well, we're an archipelago of 7,100 islands. And we have no shipbuilding industry to speak of, as of that time anyway. Of course, fast forward now, as Doris just reiterated, we are a distant fourth, but still the fourth in the world. So we have come a long way since the 1990s. And as already we've heard from Yusek Huban from our DOTC, DOTR, and from Doris, there's a lot of things that have happened since then. I think the key, the central problem remains the high cost that seems to get in the way of competitiveness. And this is really the subject of this excellent paper from Arangkada, which I encourage everybody to read. And I know that our panelists have also been contributory to the content of that. So perhaps let me focus the first question on where do you see the first or the best opportunity for reducing costs in your particular sector? And we should note the fact that we have a good representation here from the shippers themselves. We have from the government, obviously. We have the cargo handlers, and we have port management. And so perhaps since we have just heard from Yusek Huban and from Doris, perhaps I can start by addressing the question to the cargo handling sector. Michael, where do you see the best opportunity in your sector for cost reductions?
Well, let me give you that one works. Okay, thank you. I want to start with an admission, you know. When Arangkada was formed and John Ford asked me to get involved, I was the head of the logistics committee, basically. And I was the one who pointed out the very, very high cost of domestic shipping, not knowing at that time what it really costed. Now, when I got to know Doris, I got educated, and she explained why the costs are so high. So it's not that domestic shipping is making so much money, but there are cost drivers. And obviously, if you want to do something about cost, then you have to look at the cost drivers and then do something about, first of all, recognize what they are, understand what they are, and then do something about it. And here there are 1, 2, 3, 4, there are just 4 cost drivers mentioned in this brief, but they are important to analyze and do something about it. So first of all, of course, you have a very high cost of fuel. So the fuel cost is driven by market, go up and down. At the moment, they are going up, and therefore, you can expect that cost of transportation will go up also. However, also, you have to recognize that there is the element of taxation when it comes to fuel. So some of the cost is actually driven by taxation. And I was surprised to learn that the Philippines, in a way, is discriminating against domestic shipping versus international shipping, in the sense that domestic shipping is exempted from certain costs, which domestic shipping is not. So I think this would be one aspect to look at if you really want to drive down cost of shipping. Also for me, I'm trying to look forward. I'm here in the country more than 40 years. I'm invested here. I die or I prosper with this country. So it is important to see what opportunities are in future. So here we look at regional developments. How about making shipping regionally competitive? When I arrived here in the Philippines, you had a Philippine shipping line operating to Europe, operating to the United States. Today we don't have that. And it will be very difficult to catch up, but maybe we have an opportunity to do something regionally. So if there is a combined plan about developing shipping regionally and domestically, then probably that would be going in the right direction. The other one is the high cost of dry docking. Under the high cost of dry docking, very simple. Dry docking a vessel in a Philippine shipyard is twice as expensive for the Philippine ship owner as going with the vessel to Malaysia or to other shipyards, or China or Vietnam. And why? Because it's mandatory under presidential decree. Now that president is long dead already, but unfortunately the law is still there. So, so the vessels have to be maintained in Philippine shipyards, meaning to say there is not so much competition, and if there's no competition, that drives price, and that makes it expensive again. And then you have a high cost of vessel acquisition, again, taxation. You have duties, you have VAT, which foreign ship owners don't have. And then you have high cost of shipping operation driven by economics of scale. So, okay, there in some of the ports in the Philippines, you really don't have the scale, right? So you operate small ships, actually relatively old ships, and they tend to be more expensive. Then you have the milk run. You have the milk run Manila, Cebu, Cagayan de Oro, General Santos, Davao, and maybe in future Zamboanga. There, in the age of build, I think it's very important for the government and everybody of us to understand the pivotal role of shipping in an archipelagic nation for the delivery of goods. And competitively, the delivery has to be competitive. It's pivotal, it is very important. So if the emphasis is now in infrastructure, I think it is absolutely important to focus a part of that cost on the development of our ports. And there we can do something about economic of scale. If we are dredging, if we are making sure that we have more depth in more draft under more water under the bottom of our ships, then we can introduce bigger ships. Because demand has been growing up, it has been growing. Export has not been growing. Actually, in the past 20 years, as I just heard, the number of export containers out of the port of Manila is the same as 20 years ago. But import, yes, so we need lower draft, we need the dredging, and we need ship-to-shore cranes. If you do that, you have bigger ships, you can use ungeared ships. These ships are cheaper, have better economics of scale, and the cost of domestic transportation will go down.
Well, thank you for that.
Sorry, long answer.
In fact, that segues into my question for Christian. What is it on the point of view of ports operation and ports management that, again, would actually lead to this reduction in cost of
well, the
transport?
biggest single operating cost is the cost of bunker. At least in the international trade, I assume that's the same for the domestic trade. And in order to reduce bunker costs for domestic shippers, you need to give them two things. One is schedule reliability, and another one is being able to, in order to get that schedule reliability, give them a harbor to come into on time and a harbor to leave from at the right time. Now, in order to do that, as Michael was saying, you need to invest in the facilities. But take Davao as an ironic example related to us. We've invested $400 million into the port of Guayaquil in Ecuador, which is a huge reefer port, probably the biggest single reefer exporting port in the world. Why not Davao and why Ecuador? We're a Filipino company. It's a terrible question to ask. But the reason being is, as an infrastructure developer, you have to be able to make a return on your $400 million. So again, another irony is, in order to reduce the cost of shipping, you have to increase the cost in the port, because the port operator has to make a return. I'm not saying an astronomical return, but we have to acknowledge that a return needs to be made. The only way to do that is to ensure that when that facility is built, you either get subsidies from the government, or you get an environment around the port area where trade starts booming, which is where the cluster concept comes in. So make it efficient now for the banana producers to get from their plantations to cold store facilities or on proper roads that lead to proper ports, so that the volumes come up. And then you'll see that investment come in. And when you see that investment come in, and the shipping lines are able to say, I'm going to be able to come in at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning and leave at 8 p.m. on Tuesday evening, because the terminal has the equipment and the people, they'll be willing to pay the money that's required to make the return. So it all comes down to establishing a fair return for an investor, ensuring that the government understands where they must come in and subsidize certain things, breakwaters, dredging, and so forth, and developing that economic cluster around the port, so you have the volume growth that drives the further investment in the facilities.
Sir, from the point of view of the Philippine Ports Authority, I'd like to ask Assistant General Manager Miole, do you affirm what has just been said? And from the point of view of the government, where do you see the cost reduction opportunities?
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for making PPA part of this and respond to the recommendations of the Arangkada. To answer the question, PPA early on has recognized that the best way forward and the quickest way forward to build and develop the ports, meet shipping needs and demands, is to ask the private sector to do it. And we've shown that, well, my colleague here, Christian, was a small boy when we started this development. MICT was privatized, followed by the other ports. And you see what you've seen, it's not a port somewhere in Mindanao and Visayas. We've shown that it can be done. And we will continue to do so, as we have been able to succeed in asking the private sector to grab the opportunities for port development and for port operations. So we've done it, the last one being Manila North Harbor. And we were able to do earlier the Batangas and also South Harbor. We are making plans, well, not plans, but pretty soon, before the end of the year, the Port Authority will be starting to roll out the new terminal management policy where, unfortunately, after 40 years, we realized we just have to follow what we did for Manila. And therefore, the other ports in the Visayas and Mindanao will come to taste a terminal management system that a global operator like ICTSI has shown us. That's the best way to do it. So we believe that with strong private sector, their technology, their being able to respond to market changes, changes in the environment, the challenges of today's technology, AI, and so on, I will be beating my back here if I say that government will be ill-equipped to do that. But in partnership with the private sector will do that. And for the long term, we believe, and we also honestly say that as the market grows, as the economy expands, we will have economies of scale. Port development, port operations will really perform their role as the initiator of trade expansion, benefiting ships, benefiting exporters. And mind you, Secretary Habito, the last time the PPA port charges have been adjusted and increased, and a very marginal increase, was in 1994. We haven't increased a single cent out of our port charges from way back more than 25, almost 25 years. That is because we know that every increase in port charge will ultimately impact on the cost for port users, for shipping, and for cargo. And that should make you feel that even a port authority, which this forum has always claimed to be in conflict of interest, is able to do its part. Given that, being a strong regulator, we will continue to be sensitive to the needs of our industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that theme of letting the private sector do it, I guess we end up going back to Doris's argument that for a private sector to invest, and in fact, Christian made that point as well, it has to be worth it. And that means that the traffic or the cargo traffic, the production that will actually be shipped is really the one that we have to work on. But putting that aside, because that's not within the purview of even the regulators and the government departments on top of shipping, it's really for the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Industry perhaps. I would still like to ask Yusek Hudan, what do you see can be the role of your own department in, again, in encouraging the private sector to have more of these investments themselves?
Okay. As I said, the major factors for a ship owner to really invest further for the development and contributions to the Philippine economy, they're looking forward into a lower financing cost. If you compare financing in the late 80s up to 90s, the interest rate in this country is very high. Today, it has gone down basically tremendously. What has happened? In the past, ship owners would only ask government institutions like the DBP and lately Land Bank to finance the vessels. Today, many private banks are already open to financing because you know why? In the past, they don't want to finance vessels because they don't have the technical capability to evaluate how to operate a vessel. Today, many banks, one after the other, are now offering financing assistance. The other way, the other factors related to this is, of course, the operation of the vessel. We need port efficiency because we don't want any delays. Do you realize that 1 day delay of a vessel on the average of, let's say, just 500 to 1,000 TEUs capacity, the cost per day of that vessel is a minimum of $5,000 a day. So a delay of 1 day to 2 days would be very high compared to the other factors that you might want to save. And of course, the nature of our operations is efficiency. Like for example, ICTSI, in order to help the economy, they develop what they call a barge port from Tansa going to Manila, so in order to reduce traffic going there. And they have, I think, that is going to operate already. It's already operating and fully operational by this month. And these are the things that perhaps could reduce all of this. But let me go back to the original idea that we're saying with Ms. Doris Ho, saying that our economic cluster is really of importance to all of this shipping operation on the balance of trade.
Well, going back to Doris then, where do you see, what else is missing from the picture?
Okay, well, I wanted to respond to something you said, and I think that's the missing piece. You said it's not in anyone's purview except the shipping. That should be agri, that should be trade. That is our problem. My company, my biggest challenge is how to get everyone get out of silos to work on an enterprise solution. And this country must work on an enterprise solution. It means trade, it means agri, it means the LGUs, it means the Department of Transport, the Public Works, working together on what is that greatest opportunity to drive production. Shipping is only a support. We are so little in relation to a production cost. What will create the jobs, what will create development, what will create everything is having a very competitive driven mind. We must benchmark against the best. So that's one. Number two, I think it's unfair that Christian has to put a barge. Really, because other countries would have put the production cluster around the port. If you go to Ningpo, I mean, around him, can't we clear that whole squatter area around there? We could have had all of us, Michael, we would have all built warehouses around it. We would have cut the cost of the ship. But it's because no one talks to each other. Everyone's doing their own thing, and we all suffer from this every day from the traffic. Honestly, we compete with people who think differently. One, drive production, drive manufacturing, drive agriculture, drive something that you sell to the world. We don't think this way. We're so happy with consuming everything everyone else makes. Number two, decide where we are competitive, build the facilities and the infrastructure around the port. And it could be a big port, small, whatever it is, but we must have more strategic thinking with all these, everybody involved, sitting together in a room.
Well, that's exactly the challenge that has always been facing us, especially the government. I mean, the coordination across agencies is just a tremendous challenge. Yes, Christian.
May I just make a comment on financing? The problem with local financing is that the ships are bought in dollars, bunkers bought in dollars, cranes are bought in dollars, containers are bought in dollars, cement is tied to dollars, steel is tied to dollars. And unfortunately, when you have a shipping line, say, making a 2-year deal on rates in pesos, and you have a depreciation in currency, they're dead. They're dead.
Okay.
So, you know, I mean, we need to accept the fact that sometimes, look, one of the successes that we've had, and the reason we were able to survive the Asian financial crisis and the 2001 stock market crash in the US is because the PPA allowed us to, or the government allowed us to charge a certain portion of our tariff in US dollars. Our fixed fee to the PPA was in US dollars, all our investment was in US dollars, all our debt was in US dollars. So that was able to get us through. And I think, you know, we need as a private-public partnership to understand that regardless of the fact that a lot of these businesses are solely in the Philippines, a lot of our costs, or a lot of their costs, is in USD.
Well, I'm afraid I've been asked to wrap it up, but what I'd like to do is, for everybody else, except for Christian, who has just spoken, can we just get a 1-minute message? What is the strongest message you'd like to send about the topic at hand? Starting with Michael.
Now this works. Okay, My dream would be to expand in the region as a Filipino company, meaning to say we have our head office here in the Philippines. We are in most Asian countries. I would like to earn those dollars, to invest abroad and bring them back for investments here. Financing cost is important, yes, especially if it goes up quickly, which I hope it will not, right? I hope the Philippine peso will be stable. It is possible, by the way, to finance ships in peso. We have done that. But of course, what we cannot do is do away with the VAT and the duty on it. I mean, that would be the part of the government to come to the table. But again, the dream is to be competitive not only in the Philippines, meaning to say lower the cost in the Philippines, but be competitive in the region, in ASEAN.
AGM Miole, what's your strongest message that you'd like to convey?
Our appeal is for you bring your ship, you bring your cargo, we will meet them, we will provide the port, we'll provide the service, and at the cost that you like, we will talk to our private partners, we will help bring down the costs, we'll help make them more efficient, and as long as the present framework, our governance is retained, we can make that promise.
Thank you. And Yusek Hudan.
There's one topic that we did not mention, Doris and me. Do you know that the development of cruise tourism has really increased tremendously for the past 2 years? Therefore, there's a need to more port developments under PPA because this one is an opportunity for our Filipino businessmen regarding this related to maritime. Perhaps the other information is the PPA is also evaluating what we call a Panama Canal style. That is in Osamis going to Pangil Bay in order to reduce the route of local vessels. We'll have about 12 kilometers or 13 kilometers of almost Panama Canal style. So just information.
Cruise tourism, a very big thing, in fact, right now. And finally, Doris, what's your final message?
My dream, strategically, this country must strategically plan where we can be mostly competitive in production, bring about jobs, bring about economies of scale, have an ambitious way that we compete in the region, and shipping will be right behind it.
Indeed, as we've all seen from the discussion, it's not just about the shipping sector, it's not just about the maritime industry, it's about the Philippine economy as a whole. And all the moving parts have to simply work together to make all things work the right way. And one of the things we lament right now, by the way, is our exports are going down when our imports continue to surge. And that's why our trade balance the gap is widening, and that's why our peso is declining. So this is one of the main challenges we're facing right now. Well, at this point, I will not make any attempt to summarize the discussions. I would refer everybody, to that excellent paper from Arangkada, which to me is a very good holistic treatment of the topic because it starts precisely with the kinds of things that Doris was talking about, working on the economy as a whole, our production sectors, so that we can then provide the kind of demand for the services of this particular sector, the maritime industry. Well, with that, I'd like to thank our panelists and our plenary speakers, and let's please give them the usual appreciation. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you to our panelists and presenters. For panel number 3, panelists, we would like to ask you to remain on stage for a quick photo opportunity. While the speakers are having their photos on stage, may we remind the audience who may still have other questions to send them to forum@arangkadaphilippines.com. We would also like to request that you complete and submit the evaluation forms that were placed on your seats and give these to the registration counter at the ballroom foyer after the session. Also, please do not forget, we do have our networking cocktails after the forum at the foyer and exhibition area. We look forward to seeing you there. Once again, thank you to our dear panelists. Now to introduce this afternoon's keynote speaker, let us call on stage the Executive Director of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Incorporated, Mr. Eb Hinchcliffe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate the endurance of all of you staying here. I today actually have the easiest job and the hardest job. The easiest job is to introduce our next speaker, and the hardest job is to do the closing remarks and stand between you and the booze outside. I'm very honored today to introduce our keynote speaker, the last of our keynote for the 7th anniversary of Forum. And she's one of the most impressive Filipinas in the country. And this country is known for so many of its very impressive women leaders. Senator Grace Poe made history in 2013. She got over 20 million votes, the most of any Senate candidate. She hails from Iloilo. She's obviously the daughter of the national artist Fernando Poe and her veteran mother, actress Susan Rosas. She actually was the second in her family to run for president. And if you look at her work in the legislative, you'll probably notice that it's very inspired by her late father's dream of lifting up the Filipino people. She did her initial studies at Assumption and then at the University of the Philippines. And then she saw the light and went to the University of Boston, where she endured about 4 cold, snowy winters, like our senator this morning. She majored in political science while she was there. She chairs 2 very important committees, the Committee on Public Information and Mass Media and the Committee on Public Services, and we currently are hoping to get the Public Service Act passed through this Congress, the 17th Congress. She's also chaired in the past the Committee for Public Order and Dangerous Drugs. But one of her probably the most touching and favorite advocacies is that of children's welfare. And she believes strongly that the children have a right and access to quality education as well as a proper nutrition. One of the very first bills that she introduced was she filed the free lunch program that provided free lunch to malnourished children in the public schools. Before she was elected to the Senate, she also was a very advocate. Again, she was chair of the Movie and Television Regulatory and Classification Board, where she formulated the new ratings designed to empower parents to regulate what their children were watching on TV and in the movies, and to regulate and try to help them be vigilant over the viewing habits of their children. Senator Poe was she's got several bills going through Congress that the Joint Foreign Chamber strongly support. Some of these include the aviation reform, the film industry, tourism, Freedom of Information Act, which is really important, Open Access, Public Services Act that I mentioned previously, Telecommunications Policy Acts and Amendments, and the Water Regulatory Board Act. We heard a lot about water this morning. So these are very key things, and we're eager to hear more about her advocacies, and her reform measures in her speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause and greeting Senator Grace Poe to the podium to address us. Senator Poe.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Hinchcliffe, for your kind, generous introduction. I'd like to greet our distinguished guests who are present here today, Professor Shell in particular, and Mr. Forbes. I'm not sure if Doris is still here. And ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, I can't see much anymore when with the light. But today's theme is better infrastructure for a strong economy. So as the chair of the Committee on Public Services, my committee has had to study and consider various bills that deal with public transportation. So today my speech will be to discuss with you challenges and issues in the land, water, air, and transport industries, which is quite a huge topic. So let me start with the air transport sector or the aviation industry. I'm sure most of you here are frequent flyers. And usually with Murphy's Law, the things that we will encounter is number one, the crying baby on board your flight is always seated next to you. Number two, no flight ever leaves on time unless you're running late and need the delay to make the flight. Number three, the minute you go to the toilet, the plane will hit turbulence. These are things that usually happen. But without, the joke aside, you must have heard the one about NAIA being the most religious airport in Asia, because everyone in the airport prays that their flight arrives or departs on time and that nothing untoward happens to your plane. But God must have been bombarded with a deluge of prayers last August 16 when the Xiamen Air Boeing 737 skidded off the NAIA main runway. We recently concluded a Senate hearing about the incident. During our committee hearing, the question of damages came up. So initially, the CAAP reported that they are negotiating for Xiamen Air to pay something like 33 million pesos, but now they've assessed more, and it's about 72 million pesos in damages. But it is actually enough. Reports say that the crash triggered the cancellation of 679 international flights and 1,031 domestic flights, and possibly a total of 500,000 air passengers just in those 2.5 days or 2 days. Some private reports have estimated the economic losses due to the incident to amount to about 5 billion pesos. How did they arrive at this figure? In an article, it says that the GDP amounts to around 17 trillion pesos. Aviation is estimated to contribute around 9% of that, or 1.53 trillion pesos. Assuming that the 1.53 trillion is produced over the year, this amount is equivalent to about 4.19 billion pesos per day. Now, I stand corrected if we have like economists or experts here, but this is just how we've come up with a computation. NAIA accounts for 60% of this amount, or 2.5 billion pesos per day. Since the Xiamen Air incident lasted roughly 2 days, that's about 5 billion pesos. The Senate hearing brought several facts and conclusions to the surface. For instance, it's not that accidents happen, but how you manage it that is key. Mismanagement and a breakdown in communications turned the Xiamen incident into a full-blown crisis. But what also became very obvious was the need for alternative airports. So in our hearing, it's not just finding or assigning blame. It's more of looking at the long-term, the short-term, the medium-term solution to our problems. So there are currently several proposals for a new airport as well, or for new airports, as well as the rehabilitation of NAIA. So if you've not heard of it, the following are: number one, the 350 billion NAIA rehabilitation plan by the Super Consortium, composed of Ayala, Aboitiz, Lucio Tan Group, Andrew Tan, John Gokong Wei, Gotianon Group, and the MVP Group, which will build a new runway, expand, and link the 3 airport terminals. This plan will seek to increase passenger handling capacity to 47 million by 2020 and 65 million by 2022. They will be given a 15-year period by which they can manage the airport. Number 2, there's a 156 billion proposal by GMR Megawide to make NAIA more efficient through more aircraft movements, but without building another runway. But I also spoke to them, and they've they're being advised by the MITRE group when it comes to the management and the time and motion plan for the airport. So they're very confident that even without another runway, they can make it more efficient and systematic. Whereas the super consortium will have the Changi group advising them on airport management. The number 3, there's a 763 billion offer by Henry C. Sr. and Wilson Tieng to construct a new airport with 2 runways at the proposed reclaimed area at Sangli Point in Cavite. Then there's the 735 billion construction of San Miguel Atropolis in Bulacan, with 4 runways on 2,500 hectares of privately owned flatlands to make way for 60 aircraft movements runway hours to accommodate up to 200 million passengers. And of course, there's the plan to expand Clark. It's still under the consideration by the DOTR, considering that Clark is separated from Manila by more than 100 kilometers. The high-speed train or the train connectivity and other modes of transportation are key to the success of this one. So in our recent hearing, we asked why the rollout of these proposals is so unforgivingly slow. On that point, our economic managers, Secretary Dominguez in particular, responded with some very important points. When government invests in infrastructure, they look at the viability of the projects, especially the ones that may require sovereign guarantees. So far, I don't think any of them require sovereign guarantees, but there will be other considerations like the roads that are leading up to there, the real estate value. But what surprised me was what Secretary Dominguez said was the hold up a little bit on the consideration for the Bulacan Airport. They said that the government is investing a lot in Clark, and with the Bulacan Airport, Clark might not anymore be relevant or viable. But of course, that's not the case. We need Clark, not just for an airport, but for other things as well. And I think that the Bulacan Airport will serve also the needs of those in Metro Manila. At least people have their options like the Haneda, Narita setup in Japan. I agree that we must balance fiscal prudence with the public service. We should spend our taxpayers' money wisely, and I believe that transparency and accountability are 2 important principles which should be embedded in our system of governance. Hence, I have been pushing for the passage of the Freedom of Information Bill so that ordinary citizens will be able to monitor government projects. And I'm happy to say that I'm quite confident it will pass in the Senate in the coming weeks. Unfortunately, in the House, it's still pending. They say it's not FOI, but FYI in the House. Anyway, so let me now go to the water sector. It would be obvious to anybody who lives in the archipelagic country that the maritime industry is vital. Today you had one of your speakers, Doris Ho, and I just came from her maritime academy in Cavite. And let me tell you, I'm not sure if she talked about it, but it is impressive. It is a huge complex with state-of-the-art facilities, actual actual equipment that are needed to graduate, and I think even what they have inside the ship, the machinery, they have it all there. And you can be very proud to see this, especially that the Philippines actually is the #1 supplier of maritime manpower in the world. So definitely we really need to improve on the kind of training and education we give our youth that are interested in that particular career, especially now that there are also other countries that are competing. You have India, Indonesia, and other countries. So I'm glad that Doris has this, and it's quite amusing to see that a woman is leading, and it's mostly, oh, you're here. Well, mostly male, but still, it takes a woman to put it all together. So congratulations, Doris, for that. So, and yet there seems to lack, there's a lack of strategic long-term development plans for the sector. Shipping remains the major infrastructure by which islands are linked. It connects the country to international commerce and trade. Unfortunately, shipping from and around the Philippines remains expensive because the trade is small. I was fortunate enough, as I told you, to discuss the maritime sector with Ms. Doris Ho, who certainly knows the shipping industry well. We agreed that what the government should do is license the volume of products traded by each region by developing the agricultural and industrial products which they have a comparative advantage in. Many of our local producers are MSMEs, so why not cluster producers in order to obtain economies of scale? The cluster should be located around the port areas so as to give the enterprises leverage that will enable them to bargain for lower logistical costs. These production clusters will allow for shared resources. For instance, R&D around these clusters can specialize on these products, driving the entire trade association's growth. One other priority agenda for the maritime sector should be the sustained development of globally competitive maritime power. In 2015, the Baltic and International Maritime Council and the International Chamber in Shipping forecasted an impending shortage of qualified seafarers in the next 10 years. In fact, there's an increasing demand for officers who can handle specialized vessels. When Doris and I were discussing how they would move forward with their maritime academy, and she said they were actually considering artificial intelligence already. We need to be able to think forward that way. How will our maritime graduates adjust to that and continue to be relevant? The dearth of high-caliber maritime manpower can be considered a golden opportunity for Filipino seamen. Filipino seafarers are actually preferred by many international shipping lines. Filipinos account for 380,000, or about 25% of all seafarers worldwide. But our next generation seafarer must be an officer with excellent management and leadership capabilities. Therefore, what we need are first-rate maritime academies. One time I rode a Disney cruise with my kids a few years ago, and the captain of the ship is Russian, and I think the co-captain, but another officer there is Filipino. So it was quite heartwarming to see that, and I was able to see where I don't know what you call that, they call it the bridge, where the control centers were. It was quite interesting. They wanted to bring me down there with where all the engines were, but human resources didn't allow me. So one by one, the Filipinos from the engine room came up. So it was, when you're there, you just feel so much pride. So I believe that government, along with the private sector and all stakeholders, should exert efforts towards creating a Philippine maritime blueprint for ship management. Now, land. Let us now go to land transportation. Everyone who has had to spend time in Manila is familiar with the phenomenon of traffic. In fact, many of us are carrying on a relationship with our Waze guide. Pati ang Waze nalilito na rin. Largely because, does it ever happen to you? Even Waze would give you different ETAs and different routes, and will just totally stop and begin, So unfortunately, current laws do not adequately provide for the means to expeditiously and effectively solve this traffic and congestion crisis. There has been a public clamor to shift to a more dependable and accessible mass transportation system that is sensitive and considerate to the needs of commuters. In response to the call of the times, our committee drafted a bill, and I am actually the main sponsor, which proposes the grant of emergency powers to a traffic crisis manager, who along with heads of key agencies must come up with an action plan. But I must tell you, I'm only one of 23 senators. And some of my colleagues have made reasonable demands from the DOTR to please present to us your priority projects before we grant you emergency powers. And I think that's reasonable. You'd think that they'd actually submit it. Immediately, eagerly. No, they haven't until now. Am I surprised? I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. You give them so much money in the billions and they don't even spend it. And if they do, it's not even in the projects that, you'd hope they would prioritize. So you give them that much power, are you really comfortable of a traffic czar that will take over? You know what their initial proposals were, right? Was to put a cable car in EDSA. So I mean, that alone should really keep us a little bit cautious. In fact, I asked, when the president newly won, I actually approached him and I asked him, Mr. President, I heard you wanted emergency powers, and this is exactly what he said, and I quote, it doesn't matter to me. I don't know if he was just taking it, he didn't want to be too serious about it with me, but that's what he said. And I always question the fact why it wasn't really one of the priority bills, because we know that if the executive really wants it, it will be passed. Just like Train 1, just like the BBL. These are even more contentious bills. So, there you go. Maybe because he himself said earlier that maybe because there's a question about corruption, and he said, never mind. But ladies and gentlemen, we don't need it if the question is just about implementing these projects. Because we already have laws on right-of-way issues that the government can expropriate quickly. We also have laws on emergency bidding. So it's all in place. What we really wanted was just to harmonize it. So if there's really the will on their part, it can be done. What I don't want is just actually giving power to somebody, or not to somebody, but to a group that will take advantage of it, especially since we don't have yet the Freedom of Information passed. So that's where it is. Now, regarding the action plan, it is composed of a mix of vital infrastructure projects, such as the BGC Link Road project, which will serve as an alternative to EDSA and C5, as well as traffic management solutions such as computerized traffic signalization system. More importantly, the action plan is linked to the roadmap for transport infrastructure development for Metro Manila. In a nutshell, the roadmap envisions a shift from the current monocentric form of development to a polycentric one. This means development of other urban centers which will establish the north and south of Metro Manila. There's also the north-south rail lines, which will form the backbone of this new area. One example is the commuter train services using the PNR right-of-way between Malolos and Calamba. And the other is a subway line from San Jose del Monte to Dasmariñas, Cavite. This proposed law has undergone extensive debates in the Senate. I have done my best to get this bill passed. But maybe now I think our focus should be more on the quality of projects that they will submit, and we can just list particular projects and not give blanket authorization, which may be a little dangerous. So let me go now to other proposed bills. Several studies have been made recommending the removal of formal restrictions to investment in order to allow more foreign investments. And I know that the AmCham is very interested in, and also the joint foreign chambers. The entry of more foreign direct investments can certainly benefit the land, air, water industries. An increased number of players in capital investments will enhance competition, which will lead to more choices and better consumer service. Bringing down the cost of travel will promote tourism, which provides jobs and helps attain inclusive growth. More importantly, cheaper travel will increase connectivity by facilitating more family reunions. At the moment, our laws restrict foreign ownership in public utilities. The law provides that the foreign ownership and operation of public utilities shall be granted to citizens of the Philippines or corporations that are at least 60% Filipino-owned.
The problem is that our old laws have an extremely broad definition of what public utilities are. For instance, it covers business in electricity, wireless, communication systems, common carriers, marine, repair shops, watercraft, and even ice plants. The key to liberalizing investments in public services is to redefine public utilities by amending the Public Services Act. For your information, I have filed a bill that proposes the amendment to this law. Under our draft, the transport and telecommunications sectors will no longer be on the list of what is considered a public utility. This will remove restrictions of foreign investments in these sectors. So now it's in the period of interpellations in the Senate. There are 2 more senators that have signified their interest to interpellate. And hopefully after that, we will be able to hurdle this in the Senate. The bill will be scheduled for, I hope that we can count on you also for the support of this piece of legislation. And if you have any concerns about it, please approach me during this period. And then we also have another important bill, and that is the National Transport Safety Board bill. It is the creation of that. It is already on 2nd reading in the Senate and is supposed to undergo the period of interpellation. A transport safety board similar to the jurisdiction like the US can swiftly enter an accident area and investigate. Not like, let's say, let's say one particular agency is at fault and they're going to investigate themselves. If it's the LTO, for example, will also investigate themselves. I don't think there will be fairness or objectivity there. So definitely we have to have one agency just dedicated to safety investigation. So we're like, for example, a transport safety board could have been part of the Xiamen Air incident investigation as well, and not just the CAAP. So transportation is a vital factor in achieving success in business and in governance. I think our goal should really be develop a modern, reliable, intermodal, safe, and affordable transport system. We know that we've been successful in our public transport system if all social classes will opt to take public transport as opposed to take their cars to work. But I would also like to say that my advocacy, aside from, well, I have public services, but today I will be signing a BICAM report that will institutionalize the first 1,000 days of a child's life. And what is this? From the time a mother is conceiving until the child is 2 years old, the government will be giving support to those mothers who cannot afford. So in the health centers, they'll have vitamins, milk, some food, check-up, because they said that brain development really begins while in the womb of a mother until the child is 2 years old. We need this because our population is very young, our population, and our sheer numbers are advantage, but we need to grow an intelligent population, and that really begins with proper nutrition and care. So we have that passed already. So to everyone, thank you for your invitation. I have to go back to the Senate for work. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Senator Grace Poe. We are very grateful and honored. Thank you for joining us today. May we ask for a quick photo opportunity together with the heads of our joint foreign chambers. We would also like to present you with a token of appreciation. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Senator Grace Poe. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to an end of our program. To formally close our forum, may we please call back on stage the Executive Director of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Incorporated, Mr. Eb Hinchcliffe.
Once again, good afternoon, everyone. As I said, it's not I have the difficult job of giving closing remarks when all of you are out there ready for a glass of wine, but also as the senator leaves. That was excellent report just now. What a great way to wind up the day today with the excellent speech by the senator. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, it's kind of a sad note that we're ending our 7th forum. It's always, the theme of it has been better infrastructure for a strong economy. And we're really grateful for the 34 experts, at least 34, I didn't count them, but I think there's around 34, 35 experts that spoke today. And they shared, both from the public and the private sector, they all shared their wisdom with us. And I hope you gained as much out of it as I did. I found the whole day very good. Before we relax and go out and have the wine, let me just try to wrap up some of the thoughts I have. The first one was water. Water is not scarce in the Philippines. In fact, I think we'll have a little too much of it this weekend, maybe. But management of water needs much more to be taken care of. If you're going to really have enough safe water, sanitation, irrigation for future generations, there's much that needs to be done. That's what I learned today. This needs to be done in terms of governance of water resources, strengthening our institutions, and improving hard and soft infrastructure in the water industry. The time to begin to restore our watersheds and better manage our infrastructure and river basins is yesterday. For 2 decades now, 20 years, we've been talking about the need for an apex regulatory body to harmonize and streamline the governance of the water situation in the Philippines. The time to get this done is also yesterday. Then we heard about road and rail. Something really has to be done. If we're not going to experience gridlock in this country, as we continue to pour more and more cars into the cities with less and less asphalt, the more congestion will be. We're constantly jammed with a million more vehicles and motorcycles. There's a long list of road transportation projects, both for PPP, GAA, ODA, and that's the good news. During the next year, we expect to see more and more build into the build. And if that's the case, if the approval and the right-of-way acquisition, as the senator just mentioned, if that process needs to be completed faster. That's for my takeaway on the road and rail. I thought the panel for the New Wave City, very interesting. It was really good to know that there is life outside of Imperial, Manila, Cebu, and Davao. These next wave cities we heard about today is really it's really great to learn about, as it, again, helps us to decongest Metro Manila. Seaports and shipping, we just heard a great report, especially from the panel just now. The potential for the Philippines in shipping is tremendous, but also the challenges are also so many. I did like the idea that Doris was talking about, regional economic clusters, closer to the ports. Following the Thailand example or Malaysia example or maybe even South China example. Those are very good. We need to modernize our ports, develop the onshore maritime services, and grow our shipbuilding industry. We have the talent, we have the ability, we just need to grow the shipbuilding, ship repair, and expand home porting and new destinations, of course, for cruise tourism. I also thought that the information about how many vessels come in full and go out empty, whether it was 2 out of 10 or 4 out of 10, whether it's domestic or international, was really amazing. We need to trade, as Doris said, shipping follows trade. So I think as the Joint Foreign Chambers and our task, especially following today, our task is to create that trade. We can fill up those containers going out. We started off today, I thought it was an excellent presentation by Mon Fernandez. He's also from the private sector, and he gave his valuable insights, and that was really a great way of starting the day. We had 3 young senators today. You know, obviously the last one, Senator Grace Poe. Earlier we had Senator Sherwin Gachalian, yeah, I can usually pronounce it, win. How's that? And of course, Senator Sonny Ongata accepted award for his father. These young congressmen, these young senators really give us a lot of hope, and we hope we'll see them again in the next Congress. Finally, I'd just like to make a final request to make you get out your mobile deal, look at your calendar, and put in the date, November 27th. That will be the date when we do our next Arangkada Fora. It will be on creative industries. The Joint Foreign Chambers strongly believe that creative industries will really be the next big industry to fill some of the void that may be created in the BPO sector, for example, as AI takes away some jobs or robotics take away jobs. Creative industries can replace those jobs. And with that importance on it, we will be releasing our next policy paper on creative industries. That's November 27th at the Raffles Hotel in Makati. So please, mark your calendar, save the date, and share that with us. With that, though, I'd like to again say thank you for being here today, and from the Joint Foreign Chambers, and from all of the attendees today, I'm sure that you got your money's worth. We'll be back here again in November for that one, and then after that, we'll see you for the 8th Arangkada Fora. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eb Hinchcliffe. Ladies and gentlemen.
I don't think I had to tell you, but John just reminded me, everybody's invited for drinks outside. So go out there and wet your whistle.
Thank you again, Mr. Hinchcliffe. And yes, we would like to invite everyone to our networking cocktails at the foyer area. Please do join us and enjoy the music of Sergeant Ronnie Halasan of the Philippine Army. Once again, this has been the Arangkada Philippines Fora 2018 on better infrastructure. See you all on November 27 for the Creative Industries Fora.
To always be there for you. Anywhere, anytime. Providing you a trusted approach in managing your money. Enriching relationships for a brighter future. BPI is moving towards nurturing your tomorrow.
The race toward better technology has brought significant improvements to people's lives. But in that race, the focus became technology, leaving behind the heart of service, the very connection with those for whom technology must serve. We'd like to change all that. Here's a warm hello from Eastern Communications. We're here to present a refreshing point of view that when it comes to delivering business communication solutions, it's time to bring back the human connection because it's just as important as the technology. This is what sets us apart from all others. Eastern Communications is business made personal. It means getting intimate with our clients' needs so we can provide thoughtful solutions to help them achieve their goals. That's why we are madaling kausap, may malasakit. We are maalam at maaasahan. When we have a heart for service, our every move seeks to meet the needs of our clients. Our clients are happy when their needs are met. When they're happy, they're in a better position to make their own customers happy.
Being in the service industry myself, I can say that biggest isn't always better. It's the one that serves you best, the one that treats you right.
You see, beyond advanced communications technology, we see the people who will use them.
In my work, I'm having a good day when everything just works well. Nakaka-good mood talaga.
And so, we see problems that must be solved.
An expert is only useful if he understands your business. Diyan magaling ang Eastern.
For every challenge, there is a happier outcome.
In my work, when opportunity calls, answer agad.
Every goal is the destination.
Kahit maliit pa lang yung negosyo ko, big help talaga yung alaga ka. Salamat, Eastern.
We see every relationship that must be strengthened.
Thank you for making me feel like your biggest client.
As we do all we can to offer technology that is always solid and reliable, we never lose sight of our brand of personalized customer service. It's a connection that is both high-tech and high-touch. We see a customer who will be glad to know that our connection is as reliable as our commitment to personalized customer service. Unwavering, unflagging, and undeniably strong. High-tech and high-touch. That's our strong connection. We are Eastern Communications.
Yesterday we had a dream from our hearts, from our minds. We let it fly. Now we see and now we share. Yesterday just a dream.
Metro Pacific Investments Corporation. Let's move forward.
Water, electricity, toll roads, hospitals. Our nation is getting stronger every day. Metro Pacific Investments Corporation. Harnessing the potential of a growing Philippines. Together, let's move the nation forward.